Awesome. Well, I think we'll get started. We are pushing up a little past 1 o'clock now, and I know we said we'd start at 1, and I want to make sure that everyone is able to move on with the rest of their days. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and then we'll get started. So a little bit of kind of housekeeping things. Down at the bottom is a Q&A as well as a chat box. If you have any comments or questions or things, you can feel free to throw them in either of those. Lisa, as well as some of the other of our connectors and NRCS staff that we have on here are gonna be keeping an eye on that, answering any questions that I might miss, and just kind of helping me out on that end so I can keep focused on what we're doing here. So, but please feel free to put them in that just so that we can make sure to get your questions asked or answered. We're gonna go through a few things here, if I can get my screen to go. We'll start off just kind of sharing a little bit about what this program is all about, this Conservation Connections program that we're kicking off here. This is kind of the first major project with it, is these webinars we've got today and tomorrow in Minnesota and Wisconsin, specifically kind of focused on beginning farmers. But we'll move on to introductions, a brief intro of our farmer connectors that we have, many of them on the call. You can see them as the different panelists, as well as the NRCS staff we have on here are going to be helping answer questions and correct me any mistakes I might make. We've got the pros, so that's beneficial. We'll do a brief overview of NRCS programs in the NRCS, well, just the NRCS organization, and then the programs, as well as a little bit on soil health. And then we've got 3 farmers who are going to share their experiences within this NRCS program and the different programs that they have implemented on their farms and how they were helped. And then we'll just open it up to questions and conversations. We've got, like I said, a couple NRCS staff here who are the real experts, and you guys are the ones doing this stuff. So we're going to open it up for question and answer just so that we can get your specific questions answered. With that, I will go ahead and get started. The Conservation Connections program is a new program that is in joint between the Sustainable Farming Association, Renewing the Countryside, and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS. The goal of this program is to reach out directly to historically underserved farmers and provide them with connections and make them aware of the resources that are available to them through the NRCS. Many people may not even know what is available, and if they do know how to what's available, they may not know how to pursue those options. And so that's our goal here, is just to provide connections between the farmers who are looking for those resources and the people who are providing those resources. When I say historically underserved farmers, and that's kind of specifically the goal of what this program is to reach out to historically underserved farmers. The NRCS has a definition, and this is the different definitions taken from the NRCS. Beginning farmer and rancher, which many of you guys may be, and that's a farmer or rancher who has not operated a farm or ranch for more than 10 years. Limited resource farmer, I took these right off of another NRCS resource because it even goes beyond me, but essentially it has to do, it's someone whose direct or indirect farm sales are not more than the current index value in each of the previous 2 years and has a household income at or below the national poverty level for a family of 4. So if you feel that that may be you, or that you have something, you can reach out to one of us or to an NRCS staff, and we'd be happy to work more to help define if you fit into one of these categories. Socially disadvantaged farmers, according to their definition, pertains to American Indians, Alaskan Natives, Asians, Blacks or African Americans, Native Hawaiians, or other Pacific Islanders and Hispanics, and then veteran farmers. And so these are the people that we are specifically trying to provide outreach for and connections. However, this program, we're not turning anyone away. We're happy to help people just to connect with them with NRCS and any questions that they might have. So feel free to ask away if you do have questions. We have on our team a fantastic group of farmer connectors. In Minnesota and Wisconsin, we have this is the list of the Minnesota connectors: Moses Mamanye, Brett Olson, Sarah Lindblom, Noreen Thomas, Kathy Zeman, Dan Zimmerly, and John Beaton. They're all farmers here in Minnesota and spread out across the state. And so if you have questions, and at the end we'll ask you if you want to be connected with a farmer connector to let us know, but we will connect you with whoever of these might be the most geographically make sense for you, and we'll connect you with them, and then they will help further connect you with NRCS and the programs that might be applicable to you and your farm within your context. So we also have a couple NRCS staff on the call here too, and we have both Keith Klovac and Lisa Buckner, and they are going to be, like I said earlier, kind of watching in on the chat and the question and answers, and also hopefully stepping in if I say something incorrect, just to keep me in line and make sure that we've got all the right stuff that we're covering. So what is the Natural Resource Conservation Service? It is the primary agency within the United States Department of Agriculture that provides technical and financial assistance to farmers and landowners. It started in 1933, and if you guys are probably not many of you, I certainly wasn't around in the 30s, but that was the time of the Dust Bowl in the Southwest, and even though we may not have quite been impacted by the Dust Bowl quite as heavily as there was in the Southwest, we still had erosion and soil management issues due to, poor, or just at the time, a lack of knowledge of how certain farm practices and management practices impacted our farms and our landscapes. We had, gullies and soil erosion due to rain as opposed to wind, and there actually is wind erosion up here as well, just maybe not quite to the level that was found down in the Southwest. But in 1933, the Soil Erosion Service was established to fight soil and wind erosions that was seen down there, as well as the erosion that was seen up here. And you can see that photo there is Minnesota's first state conservationist, along with some of those early founders and program folks. In 1935, the Soil Conservation Service became an agency of the USDA and began to work with farmers on ways to improve those soil management practices, and has advanced a long way since then, obviously now being known as the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and offering several programs which we will talk about in the future or later in this presentation, but practices just to further that mission of improving our soil and our natural resources. The United States Department of Agriculture covers a vast array of different things. You can see the Natural Resource Conservation Service there down in the bottom left under the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation. But the USDA also covers a variety of other things, from food and nutrition all the way to ag statistics and economics research, as well as forest management and ag marketing. There's really a large amount that the USDA covers, but the NRCS is one of those programs. Within the NRCS, then, the chief of the NRCS is Kevin Norton. You can see in that map that we're the central region, and our regional conservationist is Salvador Salinas, and our state conservationist is Troy Daniel. Then as we break it down further within Minnesota, each state has districts, and within Minnesota we have districts and regions all over the state with local area offices and regional offices, as well as the state office housed in St. Paul. State level, again, we have our state conservationist, Troy Daniel, and then it breaks down as we get to our own local offices, the different teams that are available to help us and work with us at that level. So funding for the programs within the NRCS come from the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill last enacted was in 2018. It's a 5-year program, and so funding for this Farm Bill will last until 2023. The funding covers a variety of different things. Conservation programs, there's a small part of it. The vast majority, actually, surprise to many people, is not ag and farm directly related anyway. It's largely nutrition programs, food stamps, and the SNAP program, which is surprising to a lot of people, but this just kind of shows the breakdown of what that Farm Bill funding largely covers. And here in Minnesota, you can see what 2020 looked like for funding and within Minnesota specifically, with EQIP and CSP covering over several 100,000 acres enrolled in those different programs, with several millions of dollars being deployed to improve and implement conservation practices on our farms and our landscapes within the state of Minnesota. The vision and mission of the NRCS, I really enjoy the vision. To me, it speaks of a pretty cool dream that I think a lot of us would share, and that's a world of clean and abundant water, healthy soils, resilient landscapes, and thriving agricultural communities through voluntary conservation. And if you think of that, I mean, it really is just a beautiful dream, and that it expands beyond our own farm walls, our farm borders and fence lines, and expands across the whole country, and envisioning a world full of clean and abundant water, healthy, productive soils, resilient landscapes that are, resilient to the many, climatic changes and weather challenges that we're faced with as farmers today. That if we can improve our conservation and build our soils, that we can build more resilient landscapes to be obviously resilient to those challenges that we're going to face. And also just thriving agricultural communities through voluntary conservation. And that's a neat thing. When I read that, I almost look at it and see as hopefully maybe the NRCS goal is to no longer be necessary at some point, that the practices that they're currently providing funding and cost share for in the long term won't be necessary, because farmers are voluntarily implementing these practices and recognizing the benefits of them to their soils, to their businesses, to their farms and ranches, and voluntarily implementing them as they go. And so here's essentially the list of priorities that the NRCS has deemed important to focus on within their practices and their programs that they offer. And I'm not going to read them all to you, but I do want to focus on the bottom two, because that is where I really feel that the Sustainable Farming Association, Renewing the Countryside, this program that we're doing with Conservation Connections becomes the most relevant. And that first, or that bottom one, is to elevate the importance of soil health across our agency's outreach and communication efforts to further enhance and promote the delivery of soil health principles to staff, customers, and partners. Sustainable Farming Association and Renewing the Countryside have been active in this work of improving or educating and providing networking for farmers to improve soil health management on their farms for many years, both of our organizations, and we feel that this is an opportunity for us to help NRCS in that goal as well, and that priority. They're also priority there to expand focused outreach efforts to increase agency awareness among populations of young, beginning, small, veteran, and historically underserved farmers and ranchers. And so those priorities is really where this Conservation Connections brainchild started. Is just how can we use our resources, our networks, our connections to help the NRCS with those priorities and those goals of theirs. And so that's what we're doing here today, is to help with that. And soil health is a big part of that. It's becoming more and more popular, which is honestly really it's exciting and inspiring. You can't hardly pick up an agricultural magazine now without reading something that at least connects to our ties to soil health. And 20 years ago, when some of the main names, Ray Archuleta, Gabe Brown, were getting going on this, they were fighting an uphill battle with very little, if any, recognition or appreciation for the work that they were doing. And now soil health is a common term amongst many farmers and farm productions or farm magazines and publications, which is awesome. We're making progress, and we're excited to have support from so many people and farmers and organizations like the NRCS. But soil health is just really important for a ton of reasons. Beyond just what it can do for our natural resources and wildlife and whatnot, it can be very valuable for you as a farmer. Improving your soil health and building a healthy soil ecosystem can create more productive soils. When you look at just bottom line profitability, if you can produce more without adding any inputs or without adding any more costs, you are going to be more profitable. And then the second one there is healthy soils can reduce production costs as well. And so if you can increase production as well as reduce your inputs and necessities going into it, you can increase profits even further. And I think that's where a lot of people maybe don't fully put that connection together, is that soil health is not just conservation, it's not just maintaining, it can actually improve your farm, improve your soils, improve your production methods to increase profit for your farm. But then beyond that, healthy soils protect natural resources on and off the farm as well. It's not just about the bottom line. It's cool that, you know, I've heard many times when I talk about certain practices with farmers, things like cover crops or something, before they put together what financial value that might offer to them, they just think, they may just think, well, that's not something I can afford to do, or that won't generate me a return. It's either or in a lot of folks' mind. It's, I can focus on soil health, focus on conservation, focus on improving my habitat, or I can focus on profitability and production. When in reality, the thing that we're finding more and more often is that we can have both, and we can improve our profitability and production and also improve the natural resources and the lands that we've been called to, you know, steward essentially. And also that our soils and that our impacts that we have on our farm do go beyond our farm borders. They can impact people downstream from us, downhill from us. And where I am in Southeast Minnesota is very rolling hill, bluff country, and that comes with some advantages and some disadvantages, but we have to be considerate of the people beneath us. And by implementing soil health practices, I can be confident in knowing that I'm improving not only my land and my situation, but that I'm not hurting or damaging those downstream. So that's a big part of it for me. And then the statement that Franklin Roosevelt said is that the nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And there's a tremendous amount of historical data of nations in history that have, you know, fallen to that, that very statement. And it's true today that we need to focus on improving our land as well. And then a cool thing that I can even attest to seeing on our farm is just that healthy soils can reduce the nutrient loading and sediment runoff and improve pollinator and wildlife habitat. And as we on our farm have put more land into perennial pastures and cover crops and grasslands, we have been seeing a tremendous number of even, you know, rabbits and birds and bugs and insects. And this last fall or summer, whenever it was, when the monarch butterfly migration happened, we saw more butterflies on our farm this summer than we have ever seen in the past. They were everywhere. Our trees, you couldn't tell the difference, but like you thought it was just full of fall leaves, but it was just monarch butterflies. And it's a beautiful thing when you can begin to improve habitat and for wildlife and pollinators. It's exciting to see. And so soil health is important. There's not much of a debate about that, and it can be beneficial for everybody. But how do we improve soil health on our farms? That's the big question. And that comes down then to what a lot of people have kind of narrowed into as the 5 major principles of soil health. And as you look at these and listen to these, it's important to remember that each one of these is, you know, I may mention a specific situation or application of these soil health principles, but that may not be the application that applies to your farm within your context. And so looking at these principles, it's important to recognize that each soil health principle is applicable to every farm, but how you apply those soil health principles to your farm is going to be completely different than any other farm out there. And you need to keep that in mind and consider your context when applying these soil health principles to your farm, and working with a farmer connector through us or with an NRCS staff person to you know, provide technical assistance on how to implement some of these practices that they offer funding for and technical assistance for is going to be an important part of applying these on your farm. But to go through those briefly, soil cover. Soil cover is important for so many reasons. The obvious one that a lot of people may think of is just water erosion. When you can have something on the soil or wind erosion, it protects that soil from water and wind. But a thing that a lot of people miss also is that keeping your soil covered protects it from heat and sunlight in the heat of summer that can kill biology that is working for you to bring nutrients and make nutrients available to your soil, and that biology is working to form soil aggregates and break down carbon and break down a residue and turn it into carbon in your soil to increase organic matter and increase water holding capacity and infiltration. So there's benefits to soil cover in addition to just the erosion. Limited disturbance, and immediately the mind goes probably to tillage, but disturbances can also be considered chemical disturbance. Fungicides, herbicides, pesticides can kill important mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, important beneficial plants and insect species in our farming system that can improve our land as well. So minimizing disturbance at every level, both chemical and physical. Living roots. When you have a living root on your plant or on your soil and a living growing green plant above the soil surface, that is nature working for you. Every day, every second that plant is growing and photosynthesizing, we are taking carbon dioxide from the air and putting carbon into our soils, which is improving, feeding biology and improving our soils in the ways that we've already mentioned. And so keeping a living root and a living plant in our soils as long as possible is extremely important for that reason. Diversity. Just like you and me, at least me, I don't know, I think I could eat mac and cheese every day forever. I love mac and cheese, it tastes good, but in reality, at some point, it's not gonna be very good for me and it'll probably get old. And the same can be said for our soils and for our animals and whatever we're feeding, and that the same thing again and again is not beneficial, and diversity is important in our soil systems, just like diversity is important in our own food systems. Every plant offers a different service, a different skill, or a different opportunity for that soil, be it a legume that can fix nitrogen, or a deep taproot that can take nutrients from deep in the soil, or a fibrous root system that can break up compaction. Every plant has a different purpose that it can serve in your farm systems. And so increasing diversity as much as possible to get as many different types of plant impact on your land is going to benefit your soils in more ways than could ever be done with a single or small number of plant species on your land. And so improving or increasing diversity is going to be important as well. And then lastly, integrating livestock. And that's one that a lot of people maybe get pretty scared about. They think, well, we tore out the fences a long time ago for a reason, and that's because I don't want to be there every day, and I don't want to deal with the cows getting out. And if those are fears you would have, I would encourage you to reach out to me. I would love to work with you on figuring out a plan to get livestock integrated into your land in a way that that reduces a lot of that stress and that fear. But livestock can be an incredibly important piece of improving soil health. They can accelerate the actual actions of soil health by taking a lot of these, what otherwise might be considered waste, like residue, and turning it, crop residue, corn residue, and turning it into a plant available nutrient source through manure. But also, they take a lot of these practices that I've mentioned, things like no-till, leaving crop residue on the ground, or limiting disturbance, same thing, and cover crops through they take things like cover crops and that crop residue, and they can turn it into a dollar value on year one, where you may look at that and say, well, I'm not going to get any value from leaving my corn residue on the surface, or I'm not going to get any value from planting a rye or oats and peas cover crop. But if you integrate livestock in a way that they can graze that, you can actually create value year one in the form of pounds of meat or custom grazing days, as opposed to waiting for those soil health benefits that may not express themselves on year one. And so livestock can be a very important piece of building soil health on your farms, and one that I would encourage you all to consider how you can do it. And I've even seen on a half-acre backyard market garden an individual using ducks after their vegetables were taken off to graze over their vegetable production area, and it's just truly incredible to me that, you know, livestock are versatile, they're adaptive, and the technology that we have today, which may not seem like fancy technology like a cell phone or something, but a fence post and reels, we can move cattle with the precision of a zero-turn mower and use them to to perform a service that prior may not have ever been possible. And so that's pretty exciting. And just a reminder that as you look at these soil health principles, to consider them within your context, because rye cover crop after soybeans doesn't apply to you within your farm, and integrating cattle may not work on that half-acre backyard vegetable farm. But being creative and using the principle within your system and applying it uniquely to your system is how you can implement these principles. And again, we have people who would be happy to work with you and help you on those things. So the first step, if this is something you want to do, and I'll get into the programs, there's a lot of programs available to you through the NRCS to help you. The first step is going to be to reach out directly to your local NRCS office. They'll work with you, talk through some of the steps with you, and they'll come out to your farm and walk the land and help work with you to develop a system. If this is something that you are not comfortable with, if that scares you, you're not sure who to reach out to or how to reach out to them, reach out to us and we'll set you up with one of our connectors to walk with you on that process, even of getting connected to a local NRCS person. We're grateful that the resource is available all over, but if that's something you're not sure of how to do, again, let us know. So some basics about the program and resources available. They provide both financial and technical assistance to farmers. Financial obviously being dollars, and technical assistance just being, you know, walking you through how to do something, helping you implement and improve your practices and management on your farm. They're completely voluntary. This isn't anything required. It's not, you know, they're not going to mandate you do something without, and if you were on the conversation earlier, Lisa was kind of talking to you about that, but they implement these through contracts. And so you commit through these contracts to do certain practices, but if you're not willing or interested to do a certain thing, they're voluntary and you're not going to be required to do something. They are extremely competitive. There's a ton of applications with a limited amount of funding. And so you may not be accepted year one, but they are available, and you'll be encouraged to reach out to your NRCS person and they'll work through that with you and how to apply properly and how to get that funding if maybe year one you aren't accepted. It's primarily on working lands, and these practices must have a conservation benefit, not just increased production. And I don't know why there's two production words there. That's my bad typo. It is designed to improve conservation, but as I mentioned earlier, that it doesn't have to be conservation or profit, conservation or production. The beauty of soil health is that we can improve profit and improve production while improving our conservation of our landscapes. And that's a pretty awesome thing. So the different programs. The first one that is that I'm going to talk about is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP for short. And that's a voluntary program that provides financial and technical assistance to agricultural producers to plan and implement conservation practices on their farm. They address resource concerns on private lands through implementation of conservation practices. And a lot of times what I've heard of is EQIP is the program that helps you get started with something. If you are wanting to try something completely new, like rotational grazing or implementing some of the infrastructure that's required to do rotational grazing or cover crops, this is a great program to get you started. They offer higher levels of funding cost share to help you do that. But it is a cost share program. You will still be expected to carry some of those costs. The funding limits and the funding limits available through EQIP are listed online. They have hundreds of different practices that they offer funding for, and that's all available online, and we can share that with you in the future if it's something you're interested in. But here's a few lists of some of the activities that the EQIP funding might be used for, things like energy, pollinator and wildlife habitat. Something that my family has used it for in the past is livestock and grazing, to install fence infrastructure. Soil erosion, water quality, soil health, cover crops is probably one of the first things many people, when you talk about low-hanging fruit or the easiest stuff to get started with, for a lot of farmers, that is cover crops. And there's quite a bit of different support out there for things, practices like that, but many more as well. CSP, that's the next major program, and CSP, kind of whereas EQIP was getting you started, CSP rewards existing conservation practices and also requires additional conservation activities be adopted. But CSP is kind of taking it to the next step. So now you've begun to get involved in this, you've gotten support, you've installed some of the stuff. CSP is a 5-year contract for continued support as they go further. You can see within Minnesota, there were 223 contracts covering over 190,000 acres in 2020 alone. And so the program is quite popular and does impact a tremendous amount of acreages across the country. Again, it builds on conservation practices that are available in EQIP. It offers practices, enhancements, and bundles of enhancements. So, for example, you may already currently be implementing a cover crop, planting rye after soybeans. But enhancement would be planting a diverse species cover crop or something, or bundling a few of these programs together, maybe in planting a diverse cover crop species and also adaptive rotational grazing across that as well. There's ways to implement that through the CSP. And also it's an entire operation as opposed to just a specific farm or specific field. The program is a contract for your whole farm. The last thing that I want to talk about is not specifically an NRCS program, but it's a Minnesota specific program, and that's the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. And that's a mouthful. The name kind of covers what it's about, Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. It's essentially a program where you voluntarily can apply and receive recognition and certification of your farm management practices that are benefiting the local water system. It provides recognition through their sources, and also financial and technical assistance. A lot of people may not recognize that there is actual financial assistance available through that. I believe $5,000 when they come to your farm, if the practices that you've implemented on your farm are not, or if they have some steps they would like you to take to improve the water quality management of your farm, they're not just going to leave you dry, leave you hanging. They have financial assistance to help you implement those practices on your farm. Regulatory certainty. That means that if after you have applied for and been accepted for and certified for your water quality management on your farm, that there is a change, some regulation or rule that says you must do this practice, that you are exempt from that rule for 10 years after the application or 10 years after your certification. Hopefully, most farmers who are applying for this, theoretically are the best are good managers trying to improve and steward their lands as best as possible. So if there are additional management practices that become made aware that you can do to improve your land management, most will probably implement those anyway. But this does give you some relief and some security knowing that moving forward 10 years, you're exempt from any of those things that might come up. Branding and marketing. You can see that photo on the top left there. Those individuals are holding their signs. This can be beneficial for people who might be direct marketing products off their farm, vegetables, meat, that you can share, whether you're at the farmer's market or have it at your farm store or whatever, wherever you might be sharing it. People will see it and they can ask you about that sign and say, well, what does this mean? And you can explain to them that you manage your land in a certain way and that it improves your land and your soils, and that you do it so well that you were given certification through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture that your management is of that quality. Yeah, So that is the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. It's currently in Minnesota alone, and it has impacted 978 producers across the state, implemented practices and managed and certified over 687,000 acres. And within the Ag Water Certification Program, there are a few endorsements that you can receive for additional certification on your land if you so choose. Again, those are voluntary as well. There's soil health endorsements and integrated pest management endorsements, and I believe there might even be another one or two either just coming out or starting soon, one of those being, I think, wildlife habitat. But they also have some cool estimates there. It's going to be tough to know exact, but estimates of the soil and the impacts that this has had on the land that has been certified so far. If you're wondering how people might use this funding and what people might do to get the certification, here's a list of a number of things that practices and that farmers have implemented on their farms before. I won't read them all, but you're welcome to look. These folks will come out to your farm and literally walk through what you might need to do to improve your operation, and then they walk through with you how to do that, and they provide funding to do that. And these are just an example of some of those practices. So those are a list of the practices, the programs that NRCS offers to date. They offer many other programs as well. There's a tremendous list of them on the website, but these are the two that are probably the most popular, the ones that I wanted to share with you today, that offer both financial and technical assistance. But now I want to give just a few minutes here for a few of the farmer connectors that we have to share how they've implemented on their own farms. And first up is John Beaton. So John, I don't know if you're on and able to start talking.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep, I'm here. Yep. So hi everybody. My name is John Beaton, and I am a conservation connector. I'm really excited to be part of this program. I'll tell you a little bit about our farm. My wife and I operate Fairhaven Farm, and we are just north of Duluth, and we produce vegetables in a kind of market garden style. You can see a picture of me working our BCS there, created 30-inch wide beds. And so we kind of grow vegetables on, it's just under an acre. And then we also produce garden starts in the springtime out of another greenhouse. And so I'm excited to be part of this program because of our experience with our local NRCS office. I've got cultivated a really wonderful relationship with the service technicians there and the staff there. And so you can see in this slide, this is our high tunnel that we erected and put into production this last season. And the funding for that, or the cost share for that, came from the EQIP program. And this made a instant benefit, instant return. As soon as we put the structure up, we went from putting our tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, planting them in the ground outside, and feeling very bad about the condition of those tomatoes outside. And they just do not thrive in northern Minnesota. So now that we have this structure, we were able to plant everything under cover and control the environment and control our irrigation. And we were able to produce a wonderful crop of tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, and some basil and some very unruly tomatillos. But yeah, so the experience working with the staff was wonderful. I'm very happy to share my experience as I went through that process with folks, if anyone's located in my area. And then just one other quick note, this last season, 2020, our farm was accepted into the CSP program. And so now we're going to be entering our second year of that program, and we'll then be implementing some more in-depth conservation practices on our farm, like increasing the mulch that we use in our garden, reducing the tillage that we use in the garden. We are going to do a pollinator habitat planting, and we are going to increase the diversity of our plant species in our orchard. So, and we get some financial support from the CSP program to do that. So, another really great program. And the last thing that I want to mention about that is that, as a small scale sustainable farm, like our operation, oftentimes, and probably some of the folks on here can relate to this, certain state and federal programs that are geared towards agriculture, sometimes it can seem as though those programs don't apply to the small farm. Often these programs, they're going to, want to collect data on a per acre basis. It's kind of, they're designed for the larger operations. And so, so sometimes it can feel like those programs and different things don't really apply to the small farm. But in this instance, we are being rewarded for implementing and sustaining or continuing to improve upon these conservation practices, which are kind of inherent already to our operation. It's kind of like standard procedure to minimize tillage in the market garden, and standard procedure to mulch and have diversity within our system. So it's very, it feels great to be rewarded for those practices and those things that are kind of inherent to our system. So yeah, and so again, we're located in northern Minnesota near Duluth. So if anybody is located in that area and wants to chat, I'm more than happy to connect with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Next up, we have, if I can get, oh, I went too far. Kathy. Kathy, I didn't get any slides from you, so I'm not sure if you want to, if you're on, you can just hop on and go ahead and share what you were going to share.
Thanks. Thanks, Jared. Kathy Zeman from Rice County. I'm about an hour south of the Twin Cities. I wanted to weigh in on the ability to take advantage of the programs without actually ever having a social security number or signing up, right, with the government. So there's a lot of technical assistance that the NRCS can offer that I've taken advantage of. So for instance, this year, my farm automatically qualified for Minnesota's Ag Water Quality Certification Program. I did nothing to earn it, except I reached out over the years and had my NRCS and my SWCD folks come out to my farm and give me good advice. So my farm is 20 acres. We're all organic, across the board, all plants, all livestock. But my land is all highly erodible. There's a lot of slope, between 6 to 24%. So was I a genius in being able to get that certificate? No. I was just smart enough to go to the smart people, right, in my NRCS office. And so like Tom came out and shot my contours for me. So you have a slopey land and you want to try some small grains, pastures. So he came out with the transit and just, shot 90 feet. So I would know how to put in my contour strips on my hills. They helped with putting in my shelter belt, giving me good advice on how to do that. So there is a lot of things that that we as farmers can take advantage of without not having to worry, like, are we going to be able to get, one of those 30% of the projects funded? You don't necessarily need money. A lot of times, and also if we can go to our NRCS office and just get good advice, then we can trickle in some good practices over time. And then maybe when the money's there, then you finally get it. But you can always start with the thought process and the good advice and their technical expertise. So that was my 2 cents, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something that I probably overlook a lot or forget to mention a lot. It's nice to focus on the financial part, but a lot of times what we need is just the help in the education. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. Noreen, you are up next.
Okay. Well, these are just a couple of examples that we've used on our farm. We've done the CSP and EQIP, and like Kathy just said, it's so great to have someone really help you think these things through, because you're looking at the farm overall, and sometimes you might not even like what grows well in our clay soils. Have really high clay soils, and they were jump right in and could tell me which plants. So on the left, it's one of my favorites, choke cherries. And I wanted to put a hedgerow in. And so they helped me. And one of the gentlemen said, you know, that's kind of nuts to put a half mile of choke cherries. But guess what? The wineries loved me. So it was a good move. Plus, I really like choke cherry syrup. And it was a way visually too, with a hedgerow, that the other farms, when they were spraying not so close, but sometimes too close, it kind of was a visual for them too, for them to turn the sprayer around. So it worked well for us. The middle one, the picture, if you can see, has a border or kind of a buffer. It looks like it's kind of got cut off there, but a buffer zone around a field, which with the organic field is important, but helped establish some really deep-rooted plants that helped us maintain that soil there. And it also was a great buffer zone for us. So we used it for that. And then on the right, one of my favorite, Jared was talking about the easy on is the cover crops. And this can be for the gardener out there too. Rye is really wonderful. You could put it in between your vegetables and you can mow it down, or you can utilize it as well for weed protection and kind of in between your rows. So it's not just for the big farmers, you think, or more than an acre. You can also use some of these services for things that you're doing in the garden area. But that rye turned out just beautiful, and it really kept the soil. There was a lot of flooding in our area that winter because we're flat as a pancake where we are in Fargo-Moorhead area in northwest Minnesota. So while there was some really highly eroding to the point of 3 tons, this was able to keep that soil there. One of the other slides, Jared, did you get the one with the different prescription for the cover crop? Okay, this is what a sheet would look like to give you an idea of, we're going to put in a cover crop, but like Jared said, okay, we've done the simple rye ones, but now we want a mix of things because we have different concerns in there. And you can see at the top my concerns as well as the NRCS person. So she kind of made this cocktail mix of us that, the lentils, the radishes, all mixed together. And it worked really well because what we did is we put this around a border of a field. It wasn't the whole field. I just wanted to see if we put this around the border of the field, what is the cause and effect? Well, we happened to have the University of Minnesota do some soil sampling, and boy, the microbes was quite different where the cover crop was. It was very teeming, considered where we didn't have this cover crop cocktail. It was beneath the soil, so we didn't know how to quantify that. So the U of M actually did a study on us and found that there was all sorts of really wonderful things in that soil where that cover crop was. And they add different things like the radishes can kind of break up that hard pan, when you have clay or you're taking on a garden plot that's hard as rock, those radishes and those lentils can really help. So that's my presentation, but I'm a real supporter. It's changed the land, and I find that it's also really helped me understand what's going on underneath. And if any of you ever want choke cherries, it's a great program. Just love it.
Yeah, thank you. I We'll get to questions and answers, but before I get to Q&A, because some people might hop off, their questions are answered or whatever, I want to talk about some of the upcoming events that SFA has going on in Minnesota here. Some things to keep an eye out. The big one is the annual conference we have coming up real soon, actually, February 8th through the 13th. We have a ton of different topics. It'll be a week long of virtual webinars, offering a bunch of different practices or a bunch of different workshops and things on different things that can apply to your farm, from economics and silvopasture, ag in the metro, farm and rural grocery, farm side hustles, and many more. And then our Midwest Soil Health Summit, that is early March 9th through the 11th. We've got a few big names coming in. Gabe Brown, obviously one of the most well-known folks when it comes to soil health and farming practices, author of the Dirt to Soil book. And Sarah Keogh, who's going to do a really cool talk on nutrition and nutrient-dense foods and how soil health improvements impact our food and our bodies and our own health. And then we've got a few of our SFA staff presenting a few different things on practical applications for soil health on your farm. But last, I wanted to ask if there are any questions. We have a couple questions in the chat that I think came up as we went. We've got experts on here with Lisa and Keith. First of all, they can step in and tell me where all I went wrong with what I mentioned, but then also answer any other questions. I think there was one in there on how this is applicable to rental land. I'm not sure if Lisa would want to answer that, or Keith, or maybe.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lisa Buckner. I did answer it in the chat, but I will answer
perfect.
verbally. Yes, rented land is eligible for the programs. However, there will be some things that have to be looked at in terms of what practices a person might be trying to implement, or which program. You'd have to get the owner's okay or consent to be able to enter it into CSP. And then for structural practices on EQIP, you have to get the consent from the owner.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I apologize on that one form. I'm not sure if I can zoom in or not here. I don't think that I can. It was a full sheet and it was difficult to get squeezed into a slide, but it's something, if Noreen is okay with, we can share, or we can share an example with what we send you all out after the workshop as well, if it's something you want to learn more about or see more about.
So yeah, Jared is Keith on that. So that's an example of one of our NRCS developed cover crop design worksheets. So, this would be tailored specifically towards her site, her plans, the goal she had for her site. So there's drop downs in there where our field office staff select the species and then the percentages and the weights. And so this would be tailored specifically, like Jared mentioned earlier in his soil health discussion. If you have compaction issues, we're going to throw in different species. And if you're looking at scavenging nutrients or doing stuff for erosion, or, trying to do stuff for forage. So we're really tailoring those specifically towards individuals' needs. And we have the technical resources for a lot of species to kind of target, different parts of the state, different growing seasons, and different goals of the participants or producers.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm looking in the chat box. It's weird when I unmute myself, the chat box disappears, so I'm having trouble seeing it and then it disappears. But one thing that if you guys are interested in learning more, or want to have one of our connectors reach out to you to connect you with a local NRCS office or anything, feel free to throw that in the chat box, or you can email us afterwards, whatever you prefer. My email is Jared, Jared, @sfa-mn.org. We would welcome you to reach out to us at any point. But again, feel free to post your questions in the chat box.
There was a question coming in, Lisa or Keith, maybe you could answer. Is there a particular time of year for EQIP to apply, or how does kind of that calendar go?
Lisa, I don't see you unmuting, so I will. So for all of our conservation programs, we accept applications continually. So anytime you come in, if you want to apply for CSP, EQIP, any of that, we can address that. We accept that. What we do, what we do is batch applications at certain cutoff times. So at a certain date, we had an application cutoff for our first EQIP was in November, and we'll have another one in March. For Minnesota, it varies by state, but where all the applications received by a date, we look at evaluating them, ranking, and moving forward with funding. But if you come in after one of those cutoffs, we still would work with you, accept an application, start the planning process, and move forward with that application for future funding periods.
Okay. I do see one question in there on, if I'm understanding this correctly, there is a question on finding farm or land to get involved. If I'm understanding that correctly, what resources are there available to that? I'm not sure if Keith and Lisa have any knowledge if there are any programs specifically for finding land within the NRCS. Outside of NRCS is the FSA. There are funding loan programs that can help with funding land. And maybe if there's an RTC person, do you guys do some work with land?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, Brett, please.
I can jump in on this. Hold on one sec. So Renewing the Countryside has a group of individuals that are land access navigators. John Beaton, who's on here as well, pulls double duty on this Connections program and the Farmland Access project. So we have 3 navigators in Minnesota, and we regularly work with many beginning farmers, years 3 through 10, generally, on getting prepared and for seeking land, and then also can provide legal assistance for writing good leases or purchase agreements. We also can bring technical assistance to make sure that the land will do what the beginning farmer is looking for it to do. So really a broad base of bringing beginning farmers to that. So you can go to gotfarmland.org, and there's an intake form in there to get hooked up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Iowa to work with one of our navigators.
Thank you. I'm not, to Keith or Lisa, is there anything within NRCS to help with that issue particularly that I'm not familiar with?
You're talking in purchasing of land?
Sourcing, finding land in farms. That was one concern that one of the attendees had.
I'm not aware of any
Okay.
that we have.
Sure.
One thing that I would like to share in terms of funding, when an individual that's historically underserved does get a contract, there is the ability to do advance payments that would help them in the process of implementing their contract. There are some stipulations where you'd have to make sure that something is done within the 90 days, but that is an option that's available to them.
That's a great point. And I don't know, John, I know you have experience, I think, using that. Do you want to explain kind of how that works? Because that can be a concern with a lot of these practices. They may have quite a bit of expense, and it might be uncertain of how to cover that expense before your reimbursement comes. And John, I think, used that.
Right. Yeah. No, we use that advanced payment option when we constructed our high tunnel. It worked out very well. The vendor that we bought our high tunnel through gave us some favorable payment terms and only required a 50% down payment. So I was able to take the 50% advance payment from NRCS in order to pay the vendor to basically get that high tunnel purchased and shipped, and the timing just worked very nicely. We were able to, pull the trigger on our project without having to have 100% of the funds up front. So the 50% advance payment worked really well for us. And I don't know how it works on the other programs, but for the high tunnel, which is a really popular program, that worked, like I say, really well for us. So,
If I could add on to that, EQIP is the one that the advance payment is available for, not CSP.
Good point. Thank you. Yeah. To anybody who's not looking at the chat, there were some good suggestions put in the chat to answer her question if searching for land or funding or finding land is an issue for you. Something I know I check often too, and is things like the land stewardship project, searching for land, searching for farmer clearinghouse, and a few of those other websites have things like that that folks can list land on. So
yeah, I'd point out one other is the Department of Ag in Minnesota has a land link page as well. And as far as that bridge funding that John was talking about for EQIP, at least in the southern half of Minnesota, there's the Grow a Farmer Fund, which are very low interest, very short applications for up to $15,000 that were designed in part to be that bridge funding for people using EQIP. So check out the Grow a Farmer Fund, and it's administered through the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation.
Yeah. And I don't know any particular circumstances or situations and what your connections are within your community and stuff, but I have even found that talking, I don't know, to people can be putting out there. You'd be surprised when you put out there something that you're looking for, communicating with people and creating a network, how much has returned to me in terms of information or connections and stuff. So I wouldn't be afraid to just get involved in local groups, so that whether that's an SFA, local SFA chapter, if I was going to throw a plug in for that, or another group or organization of similarly minded, similar practice farmings, that situations that might be able to be a good resource for you, that I would encourage you to do that. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. Yeah. I don't know, my vocabulary struggle. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Yeah. If not, I think we can move on. We just hit up just over an hour. So I appreciate you all so much for joining us today. I hope there was some value to you. If you have questions, want further information, want help reaching out to or connecting with a local NRCS office, if you're unsure of where to go or how to reach them, please don't hesitate to ask. One thing I should have put in here was my contact information so that you can all see it. But again, my name is Jared and my email is jared, J-A-R-E-D, at sfa-mn.org. I would be happy to set you up with and connect you with one of our connectors who's geographically, closer to you and would make sense. And the list of coordinators are also available on the website that we'll share with you after this as well. That you can go to that for more information on if you want to reach out directly to one of our connectors. We have contact information for that website as well. And I'm not sure if Lisa wants to throw that link to the RTC website. If we have it available quickly in the chat, we can throw that in there as well. But thank you all so much for joining us. And yeah, appreciate it.